Today we're going to start a classification of different types of angles. We can see 4 examples written right here on the board. We're going to start with right angle because some of the others are based off of our measurement for a right angle. Now, a right angle simply means that the angle formed by the 2 rays right here is 90 degrees. And you can see this little square drawn in the corner that shows a 90-degree angle right here. So that is a right angle. Every right angle will be 90 degrees. Every 90-degree angle can be called a right angle. We next move on to acute angles. Now, acute means that the measurement of that angle is less than 90 degrees. So we can see that this is narrower than the angle we had over here for our right angle. That is what makes this an acute angle. Our third classification is an obtuse angle. Obtuse means that the angle is wider or more than 90 degrees. So we can see that this angle formed between those 2 rays is bigger than the right angle that we saw previously. And last, we have a straight angle right here. Now this one is a little bit different because it doesn't look like there's an angle here. But what's happened is that this ray over on the right side has rotated to face exactly in the opposite direction. If we rotate that ray to face exactly in the opposite direction, that is a rotation of 180 degrees. So we can still consider this an angle because an angle is simply a measure of the rotation from one side to the other. So those are the 4 angles that we're going to be working with. Now, the next step that we're going to be talking about is naming angles. So you'll notice that the vertex on each of these angles is called A. In order to name the angle, we need some points along the lines. So I'm going to call this B, I'm going to call this C, we'll call this point here D, we'll call this point E. When you're naming an angle, what you do is simply trace out the angle with the points that you have. So you could start at B, you're going to trace along here, go to A, and trace along there and go to C. That would be B, A, C. And that would trace along these lines and create that angle. So we can see BAC would create that 90-degree angle. To show this is an angle, you could either write the word angle, angle BAC, or more typically, you would use a little picture of an angle right there. This indicates angle BAC. We could also call this CAB. That would trace out the same angle as before. So an alternate name would be angle CAB. On this one, the 2 names that we have for this would be DAE. So we have angle DAE traces DAE. And angle EAD would trace out the same angle but the different direction. On this one, same thing. We'd need 3 points. Let's call this F and this H. We could call this FAH or HAF. And that would show us the angle right there. And we're going to use this notation when we take a look at a compass. So look at this picture right here of a compass, and you will notice that we have a bunch of different rays and a bunch of different points and a few different questions that ask us to find the angle measure. We're going to take a look first at angle AOC. So you can see it traced out AOC. Now there's numbers along the outside edge of this compass. We are not going to use all of the numbers. We're going to pick one side or the other. We're either going to use the outside numbers or the inside numbers. On this one, I'm choosing the outside numbers because ray OA lines up with that 0 on the outside. It's going to make our lives a little bit easier right there. You'll notice that ray OC points to the outside number of 30. So if we go from 0 to 30 on those outside numbers on the compass, that means the angle measure for AOC is 30 degrees. Let's take a look at BOD. That's over on this other side. BOD. You'll notice that OB points to the 0, but now on the inside. So I'm going to choose the inside numbers for this one. Ray OD, you'll notice, points between 60 and 70 on those inside numbers. Now each of those little hash marks represents 1 degree. So if we count those up, we can see that it's actually at 65. So from 0 to 65, that is an angle measure of 65 degrees. Now some of these don't point along the 0. For example, angle EOD points, and I'll use the inside numbers again, from 40 to that 65. If we go from 40 to 65, that is a measure of 25 degrees. We can calculate that simply by doing 65 minus 40. All the other angles are measured in much the same way. Now the last thing that we're going to talk about on this one is this picture. You'll notice that we have two triangles and we have some arc markings in between some of the angles. Some of the angles have one arc, and some of the angles have two arcs. Those arcs are an indicator of congruence for angles. Remember, congruent means that they have the same measure. So those angles with the single hash mark all have the same measure, and those angles with the double arcs all have the same measure as each other as well. So if we take a look at one of the questions, we say identify the angles congruent to AED. Well, AED has one hash mark, so any of the other angles with one arc are congruent to AED. Next, we're going to take a look at angle BDC. And the task is to find the measure of angle BDC. Now you'll notice that BDC has one arc, and up at the top of the question it says that angle AED had a measure of 34 degrees. If those two are congruent, as indicated by that single arc, then BDC must also have a measure of 34 degrees. The rest of the angles can be calculated in a similar way. Thank you.